Ace Combat, the game series so many of us adore so much. Whether you started off with one of the PlayStation 2's titles, which I think is where a lot of us began, a later entry, or perhaps even an earlier entry, it doesn't really matter. The result is the same. We love Ace Combat. But have you ever returned to where it all began? This is Air Combat, the title that started it all for the Ace Combat series. Originally released as an arcade game way back in 1993, the game was adapted for the PlayStation 1 console and released in 1995. Yeah, 29 years ago. So, does the almost 30-year-old game hold up? Let's find out. First, we'll briefly touch on story. There isn't really much of one here, but it is there. The game puts you in the shoes of Phoenix, a mercenary pilot and leader of Scarface Squadron, who gets hired by the government to deal with an uprising in the Scully Islands, an island nation located to the south of Usea. In return for their services, the squadron would be compensated with economic rewards as well as recognition as the premier top guns in the world for their defeat of the enemy. And that's pretty much it. From there, you work to push back against the insurgent forces across various missions, striking against air, ground, and sea targets. You know all those typical Ace Combat tropes? Yep, you get to see where they all began. From the classic shooting down defenseless bombers to start off the game, to taking out the enemy's fleet, flying down trenches, and even shooting down a flying fortress, you can definitely see the inspiration that the later titles drew from. Visually though, the game definitely looks dated, there's not really a way around saying it, but considering when it released, it must have been mind-blowing at the time, because surprisingly, the core gameplay is very similar to any other Ace Combat game you've played. Once you switch the control scheme over to the expert mode, things feel really familiar. You control your aircraft's pitch, roll, and yaw just the way you'd expect, with your left stick R2 and L2, acceleration and deceleration are the same, being controlled with R1 and L1. You've got missiles, guns, the ability to cycle through targets with the triangle input. You can expand your map to a wider view to find your targets. Hell, you can even switch back and forth from first person to third person with the select button. Honestly, the only thing that's missing is the ability to hold down the target switch input to visually track your opponent. It feels like you're just playing a visually downgraded Ace Combat game. The gameplay holds up really well in my opinion. There are quite a few less enemies on screen than you may be accustomed to, but considering the hardware and year of release, I'll give it a pass. The basic formula that you've come to expect from an Ace Combat game is here. Environments are fully 3D and can be traversed as you'd expect. Missiles lock on automatically when an enemy is in range and require you to fire at reasonable angles to score hits. Enemies will try to get on your 6 and use missiles and guns to shoot you down, and you'll encounter enemy AA and SAMs. It's really the full Ace Combat package. Notably, there are a couple of features that makes the gameplay stand apart from other titles, such as branching mission paths, but the biggest I'd say is what happens when you die in mission. When you die, whatever plane you were flying is gone for good. There's no getting it back unless you reload. So the planes that you've bought and unlocked are effectively how many lives you have left in the campaign. If you lose them all, you get a game over screen and have to start again from the beginning. It's a pretty unique system honestly, and actually something I would welcome making a return in a future Ace Combat game, maybe in something like a hardcore mode. Also worth mentioning is the wingman mechanic. The game actually lets you hire a wingman on a per mission basis. Prior to deploying, you can choose from multiple wingman options that have varying levels of skill and also fly different aircraft. You can alter their behavior, so you can choose if you want them to guard your 6, engage at will, or focus on an objective. The entirety of Air Combat can be played through in just a few hours, so if you have any interest whatsoever, I'd highly recommend giving it a try. You may just be surprised at how well the original Ace Combat holds up. Let me know your thoughts on the game down below. This is Jarbo Gaming. Until next time.